Simon, this begins with a classic Donald Trump Truth Social posting. He does not seem to be coming to help the protesters. He seems to be wanting some kind of deal, some kind of nuclear agreement.
On this occasion, Andrew, that seems to be the case. Remember that just a couple of weeks ago, he said he would come to the aid of protesters militarily, and then, of course, didn't. Look, that Truth Social posting is thick on threats, but very thin on the detail of what it is he wants to negotiate with Iran. And when you say, what does Donald Trump want to get out of this? Well, one of the things he wants to get out of this is to divert people's attention away from the crisis that his administration is facing in Minneapolis after the shooting of not one but two American citizens dead by his ICE and Border Patrol agents. But I do think it's worth underscoring that Donald Trump for a very long time has been tantalized by the idea of direct negotiations between him and the Iranians. Back in December of last year, Elon Musk, when the transition was still being put into place, was deployed by President Trump to hold secret meetings in New York with Iran's ambassador to the United Nations, and that was seen as the first sign that there could be the possibility of talks. The North Koreans had reportedly said to the Iranians, you know what, if Donald Trump gets back into the White House, you want to try and reach out to him for a natter. So he's coveted that for a while, but this is very heavy on threats. He's telling them that time is running out for them to make a deal, but make a deal about what? We don't exactly know.
And it seems very unclear what militarily he could do anyway. There was one thing sort of taking out those nuclear bunkers, which they did so successfully. But, you know, the rest of the Iranian regime and its military is spread all over the place. You can't invade the country. They've got nearly enough troops for that. You can hit a few more bases, but that's not going to change anything. So actually, all these, you know, these bombs, these missiles, these fighter aircraft, what are they really for?
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly not going to be a ground invasion of Iran. I mean, this is going to be another firework display that attracts everybody's attention for a short period of time, and then we move on to the next distraction. He says that he's going to engage in an attack that will be far worse than Operation Midnight Hammer, when he deployed those bunker-busting bombs to go after Iran's nuclear facilities. But he's got a domestic issue here to confront on all of this, Andrew. 70% of Americans told pollsters just a few weeks back that they didn't approve of military intervention in Iran, even if it was intervention that was designed to save the lives of pro-democracy protesters in Iran. Those numbers are very unlikely to have shifted, especially given the fact that the protests largely appear to have been quelled, and how he persuades his Make America Great Again base that a military attack on Iran somehow aligns with their priorities, when he's still struggling to explain his military attack on Venezuela to them. I mean, that's another whole can of worms for the president to be contemplating.
Absolutely, Simon. I mean, he came into power more or less promising to do the opposite of this. No more of these foreign adventures, don't worry. And he may have forgotten that, but his supporters haven't, because he's unpopular on this. He's very unpopular, increasingly. You were mentioning ICE earlier on. That's going very badly for him. You know, later this year, there are the midterms, and there are a limited number, even for him, I guess, of distractions, which are both sort of valid, effective, and popular.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, just on the issue of Venezuela, he at least has the opportunity with Venezuela to say to his supporters, well, it's in our hemisphere. He can't say that about Iran. With regard to the activities of ICE and the Border Patrol in Minneapolis, before Saturday's slaying of Alex Pretty, a New York Times survey released on Friday of last week found that 61% of voters said that the tactics used by ICE had gone too far. Roughly 2 in 10 Republicans said that. The vast majority of people saying that, of course, were Democrats. But that was before the killing of Alex Pretty. And we know that Alex Pretty's death at the hands of those Border Patrol agents has enraged a large number of Republicans because of the fact that he was a legal gun owner in Minnesota. And we've seen the National Rifle Association expressing some degree of sympathy towards him. So those those numbers are only going to have intensified. And if you are planning President Trump's midterm election campaign, unless you're planning some kind of disruption or to make sure that it is not a free and fair election, and they may well be planning all of that, if this is going to be a free and fair election, you're looking at very grim prospects that could see the Democrats back in charge in the House of Representatives, where, remember, impeachment proceedings constitutionally begin.
Really interesting, and we've charted many Trump U-turns and pullings back over the last few months, but his treatment of ICE could be the biggest yet. But the way he's talking about the death of Alex Pretty and the way he's talking about pulling those agents out and the pushing to one side of the most controversial part of the leadership sounds like an absolute full-scale reversal of policy on this.
I'm not sure that it's a full-scale reversal, Andrew. I mean, I think there's definitely been a softening of his position. He said last night, we're going to de-escalate a bit. We know that the strutting, swaggering Greg Bovino is no longer the commander-at-large of the Border Patrol and is believed no longer even to be in Minneapolis, so he's been demoted. But the president is circling the wagons around Kristi Noem, his Secretary of Homeland Security, Stephen Miller, his deputy White House chief of staff, even J.D. Vance, who approvingly reposted a social media posting by Stephen Miller that described Alex Pretty as an assassin. So I think what he wants to do, and this takes us back to Iran, is I think he wants to divert people's attention away from Minneapolis so that he can try and bury these questions about whether he's going to fire key members of his inner circle, because Kristi Noem indicated last night she told a friend who then told the website Axios that Kristi Noem says everything she said last weekend when she was slandering Alex Pretty in those mendacious appearances behind the podium, everything she says, she said she was directed to say by the President of the United States and by Stephen Miller. So that's a massive problem for the White House.
Really, really interesting. Let's return now to the Armada itself, where we began this conversation, and ask what Trump's real options for Iran are right now. I want to turn now to Professor Ali Ansari of St Andrews University, who is the founder of the Institute for Iranian Studies. Professor, thanks so much for joining me. When you look at all this military might on the edges of Iran, and you look at the aggression of what President Trump has said, do you have any clear indication of what actually he might be able to do?
It's not entirely clear, because he tends to change his mind fairly regularly about what he's expecting and what he wants to do. He's made a number of assurances and promises, obviously, to the Iranian protesters themselves. And increasingly, I feel he's going to have to do something. Now, what this is obviously a matter of some debate. I tend to feel that there'll be lots of pressure actually on him within the American political circle, certainly within the Washington Beltway, because I think we shouldn't underestimate just what sort of what a fixation Iran is, the Islamic Republic is in American politics. I mean, here they have an opportunity to do some real damage to the Islamic Republic and to perhaps see a transformation of Iran from a foe to a friend. So it's something that I think he's probably considering quite seriously about what to do.
I guess we're all struggling to work out quite what's going on in Iran at the moment because of the internet blackout, though that seems to be patchily returning bit by bit today. But the indications are that the regime may have stopped mass kind of public executions and that kind of thing, but the repression has carried on entirely, and there's a form of martial law inside Iran. And I come back to this central dilemma. It's very hard to see what Donald Trump can do about that.
Well, he can. I mean, I have to say, even simply the sort of the threats and the sense of the unnerving of the regime has its own impact. You have to understand, of course, that as I think you quite rightly say, I mean, the country is effectively under martial law. The internet is extremely patchy. Most of the sort of digital economy that does exist in Iran is on the verge of collapse. And the currency, which was the trigger for this whole thing back on December the 28th, is still, collapsing. It's still falling even further. So the threat of the war and this sort of hanging over them is not doing them any good. My own view is that If Donald Trump decided just to sit back and blockade the country, or to sort of really reinforce and enforce, shall we say, the oil sanctions that the US have on Iran, that would probably be, that would probably do sufficient damage to the regime. Actually, I mean, they're under an enormous amount of pressure at the moment, and they're not loved, clearly. So their options are running out.
So you stand back, as it were, you circle it, and you wait for it to collapse. But you can't really use fighter jets or missiles to bring it down. The obvious targets, the nuclear bunkers, have been dealt with already, and the rest is pretty spread around the country.
I mean, you can, for instance, and I'm sure they're probably considering this, attack elements of the security establishment, the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard encampments. You don't have to do, obviously, the entire country. I think you quite rightly say this would be quite a difficult achievement to do, certainly as far as Trump is concerned. He wants a sort of a quick and decisive sort of action. That's not the sort of thing that can be done in a quick and decisive way. But the expectation will be, you see, and I think it's not an unrealistic assumption, by the way, that any form of sort of attack of this nature will just generate, will encourage people to go on the next round of protests. And of course, people are already saying this. I mean, if you look in Iran at the moment and what evidence we're getting, there's an enormous amount of anger. There's a sort of an expectation that the next round is coming. And, people have not been subdued in the way that the regime may have expected them to be subdued. They have really engaged in overkill, and I use that term very deliberately. And as a consequence of that, many, many people are angry. I think it's difficult to comprehend, looking from the outside in, just what a shock this has been to Iranian society as a whole.
Really interesting. And so far, I guess inevitably, the response from the regime has been defiant, and prepared to talk, but no more than that. Do you think there is a realistic chance that they will come to the table and say to Donald Trump, in return for a loosening of the sanctions or whatever, we will entirely give up our nuclear ambitions?
This would probably be the sensible thing to do. I don't think they'll do it, and I think the reason for that is that I don't think Donald Trump's also demands are limited simply to the nuclear program. I think he'll want much more, and I don't think they're even. I mean, they've had opportunities in the past to make concessions and to come to the table. Even when they were coming to the table, the problem is that they weren't actually delivering anything concrete. So I think the problem here, and Trump, as we know, has given them 24 hours or 48 hours. Somewhere, he said, you've got to do it now. This is just not the way the Iranians will operate. And of course, Khamenei himself, the supreme leader, is known for his intransigence on these matters. So I can't see actually that any negotiation at this stage is going to materialize. Well, as I said, it's the sensible option, but it's not going to happen.